the most physically gifted nation on earth, keeps losing at a sport built for physical dominance? This video explains exactly why, and the answer has nothing to do with size, nothing to do with speed, nothing to do with strength. Think about this for a second. The United States produced Usain Bolt's closest rivals. It produces NFL linebackers who weigh 260 pounds and run a 4.440. It produces wrestlers, swimmers, decathletes, and combat athletes who dominate every sport they commit to. Rugby is a sport that rewards size, speed, power, and mental toughness. America has all four in abundance. And yet, at the 2023 Rugby World Cup, the USA lost to Japan, a country with an average forward pack 30 pounds lighter. They lost to Romania, to Tonga. Not once in history has the USA reached the knockout stages of a Rugby World Cup. So the talent is there, but the results are not. Therefore, the problem is not physical. And here is what gets me. Everyone who covers this story talks about the same things. Lack of funding, limited youth exposure, rugby competing against football and basketball for athletes. Those things are real, but they are not the whole story. And if you fix only those things, you still do not fix the actual problem. The real reason is something far harder to see. It is the story America tells its athletes about rugby. Every culture has a story it tells about which sports matter. In New Zealand, rugby is identity. It is taught before a child can read. The All Blacks are not just a team. They are a national belief system. In South Africa, rugby carried the weight of an entire nation's healing after apartheid. In England, it is tradition, pride, class, and belonging all at once. In America, rugby is the sport people play when they did not make the football team. That is the story. And that story shapes everything. It shapes which sports the best athletes are steered toward from age 6. It shapes which coaches get the funding, the facilities, and the attention. It shapes which sports parents dream about when they watch their child run fast for the first time. And it shapes the belief systems of the players who do choose rugby. Because here is the truth that nobody says out loud. When you grow up believing your sport is secondary, you play like it is secondary. Not intentionally, not consciously, but the ceiling you believe exists becomes the ceiling you perform to. New Zealand players do not train harder than American players, but they believe differently. Therefore, they perform differently. And that belief gap is not closed by better coaching alone. It is not closed by more funding. It is closed by changing the story. Here is what I want you to understand. This is not a criticism of American rugby players. If anything, it is the opposite. The American players who do choose rugby choose it against the current. They choose it knowing their teammates from high school are getting scholarship offers in football. They choose it knowing most people they meet have never watched a single match. That takes something. Conviction, identity, belief. Those are the exact qualities that make elite rugby players. And American players already have them. They have them in a way that most rugby nations never had to develop. Because for players in those nations, rugby was always the obvious choice. For American players, it was never obvious. It was a decision, which means American rugby players are already mentally tougher than they think. But they have been playing inside a story that tells them the ceiling is lower than it is. Therefore, the first shift that needs to happen is not on the training field. It is inside the belief system. So what does this actually mean for you? It means the way you talk about rugby to yourself matters. The way your team talks about rugby to each other matters. The standard you hold your training to matters. Not because of motivation, because beliefs become behaviors, and behaviors become results. The All Blacks have a phrase they use internally. Better people make better All Blacks. It is not a slogan. It is a belief system that has been deliberately constructed and reinforced for over a century. Every time a player cleans the changing room after a test match, every time a senior player carries the kit, every time the culture is reinforced through a small act, the story gets stronger. American rugby does not need to copy New Zealand, but it does need its own story. And here is what that story could be. America already produces athletes who choose the harder path, who show up for a sport without the infrastructure, without the scholarships, without the culture already built around them. That is not a weakness. That is exactly the identity that wins. The gap between where American rugby is and where it could be is not a physical gap. It is not a funding gap. It is not a talent gap. It is a story gap. And here is what makes that both the hardest problem to fix and the most hopeful. Stories can be changed faster than bodies, faster than budgets, faster than decades of infrastructure. The problem was never the athletes. It was the story America told itself about rugby. And stories can be rewritten. If this hit differently than you expected, drop a comment below. What do you think the new American rugby story should be? I want to read your answers. And on Tuesday, we are covering the passing mistake that 90% of rugby players make and how to fix it in a single session. Subscribe so you do not miss it.